Well, good morning, Northside. One of the most beautiful passages of repentance in the Bible, I think, is the whole chapter of Nehemiah, chapter 9. I taught through a series on Nehemiah at our church recently, and um, just wanted to could go back and hit some highlights. There's some clear evidence of what real repentance is supposed to look like. And the people of Israel have rebuilt the wall. They've pulled the scrolls out and started reading the scriptures and realized how far from obedient to the truth they are, to the scriptures, to God. And so they first of all just declare in this chapter. There's this beautiful prayer. There's a whole bunch of men whose names I don't want to even try to pronounce that stand there and say, "Rise, bless the Lord your God forever and ever." Verse 5, Nehemiah 9:5. Oh, may your glorious name be blessed and exalted above the all blessings and praise. You alone are the Lord. Now, here's where they begin to list that they are aware of the favor of God in their life. They say, "You have made the heavens." And then a few verses later, down in the next verse, they say, "You actually are the one who chose Abraham and brought him out from the Ur of Chaldees. You found him faithful. You made a covenant with him." Verse 11, "You divided the seas before the Israelites when they needed to pass through the midst of the sea to dry ground for redemption. And you hurled the pursuers in the depths like stone. You gave them, once they were out there, you gave them ordinances and laws, good statutes and commandments." So there's part of repentance and redemptive behavior is to say, "I recognize you're the God of creation. You created everything. You're the God who orchestrates things. You have redemption as part of our plan, and you redeemed us out of our slavery. And then you offer us instruction, and you offer us these wonderful provisions." He goes on to say, verse 15, about the provisions that you offered them. Our shoes never wear out and all that good stuff. And then he says, then they say, not only are they aware of the favor of God, but they're aware of the rebellion and the compassion. And and this is another great section. You can't read it all for the short devotion this morning, but you should read it together because it's two chords that wind together. One chord is we acted arrogantly, verse 16. Our fathers acted arrogantly. We were stubborn. We were foolish. We were disobedient. And then the other one is, "But you were gracious and compassionate." And those two chords just go back and forth, back and forth. Look at after the arrogance of verse 16, he says, verse 17's last part, "But you are a God of forgiveness, gracious and compassionate, slow to anger. You did not forsake them even when they were struggling." You, in verse 19, "You in your great compassion did not forsake them." Verse 20, "You gave your good spirit to instruct them. Your manna you did not withhold from their mouths." And he goes on to say, "But they were rebellious, and according to your great compassion, you helped them. You delivered them into the hands of the oppressors. When they cried out to you in time of their distress, you heard from heaven. And according to your great compassion, you gave them deliverers who delivered them from the hand of the oppression." And then it says, verse 28, "But as soon as they had rest, they did evil again before you. Therefore, you abandoned them into the hand of their enemies, so they ruled over them. When they cried out, you heard from heaven, and many times you rescued them according to your compassion." So you have this whole series of reality where the Israelites, in their true repentant prayer here, are saying, "We're aware of our rebellion and your compassion." I'm just going to ask today, have you taken ownership of how rebellious and stubborn and foolish and sinful you are? Even as a follower of Christ, we struggle to be obedient at times, and he is continually compassionate. And then they have ownership of their sin and their total dependence on God. In verse 31, they recognize the grace of God in their life. "Nevertheless, in your great compassion, you didn't make an end of them or forsake them, for you are gracious and compassionate." And then they recognize that God is a just God. He has rules and consequences, which is why they were in captivity. We need to recognize that he's a just God. They recognize that they are sinners. They talk about the fact that they are continually just turned away and turned away and turned away from him. And then we have to recognize that sin has consequences. And I love how this chapter kind of wraps it out, because when you read all this, you hear the Israelites saying, we were rebellious, you were gracious, you're just, we deserve the consequences we got. Sin has consequences that we deserve. And it's a measure of true repentance, because they're calling out to God for help, recognizing their sinfulness. I pray you'll be repentant in your heart this week, and you'll follow after the Lord as you do that. Read Nehemiah chapter 9 sometime and just get inspired by it. See you soon. Thanks for watching.